conduct a question and answer session. At that time, if you have a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4 on your telephone. You may also submit a question via the chat feature. If at any time during the conference you need to reach an operator, please press star 0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Thursday, November 30th, 2017. I would now like to turn the conference over to Christy Holden. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Susie, and good morning and welcome to all of our participants today. We appreciate you joining us for today's Manager Self-Service Training. I am one of the HR business partners within Nuveen, and I'll be walking you through a few quick slides this morning to kick us off. And then I'll be joined by my teammate Virginia Rizzo, who's going to give you a demo of the Manager Self-Service tool so you can actually see us walk through a couple of transactions. And then Lori Merriam, will finish us up and make sure you're aware of some of the other training materials that will support you as a manager with Manager Self-Service. As Susie mentioned, we will be taking formal questions at the end via the Q&A, but we'll be monitoring the chat feature that's available on the screen through the conference if you would like to send us questions along the way. So feel free to send us a question or hold it to the end, and we'll do our best to answer them either in the component of the presentation where we think your question is best answered, or at the end if it hasn't been addressed already. And as a reminder, we are recording today's session as one of the tools to make it available. After Monday's session, we'll have a second session on Monday the 4th. So with that, I'll get us started. All right, so let's start at the beginning. What is Manager Self-Service? We're going to go through that in great detail today and how it's going to help you as a manager and what is and is not changing. Each of you on the phone already have access to CORE in some capacity and have hopefully used it in some fashion, whether it's approving PTO request, entering time request, approving time cards, you name it. As an individual employee, we can also change our address and make sure our personal information is up to date. So Manager Self-Service is an extension of the functionality that you may already be familiar with in CORE. So some of the functionality you've used to date may be as an employee to submit those requests, and today we'll be thinking about really wearing that other hat as a manager and making sure that you're aware how you can access information for your team, what data is available that you haven't been able to see year to date, and then how to submit transactions. We want to make sure that as the company continues to evolve, that we help you as a manager evolve with tools that are available to give you more just-in-time type information and really empower you in your role as a manager. So how does Manager Self-Service affect you as a manager? So we know what it is, but let's talk about some of the key benefits. The first is transparency that you see here on the upper left-hand corner of the screen. So as a manager, you're going to have access to HR-related data for your team. And so who do we define as your team? That's any employee that is in your manager reporting relationship. So if you're a manager of managers, that means you can see employees that report to even those managers that you manage. And if you're a manager of individual contributors, it's those employees that directly report to you within CORE. And if you're not sure who that is, it effectively means who you can see listed under you on the corporate directory. So this enables you to see both current and historical job information for your employee. It's really at your fingertips in CORE. So with that transparency, it also provides you control. You're able to go in and make certain changes for your team. You don't have to wait and contact an HR partner. We've heard from some managers, gosh, I think in the time I typed this information into an email, I could potentially have done it myself, and now you will have the chance. So you'll have the opportunity to submit things like new location, job titles for your team, and track those transactions from start to finish. So that's another enhancement. Instead of saying, hey, has this been done? You'll be able to go back in and see whether or not it's been done. That provides some of the simplicity as well in just a few short steps of entering the changes and looking up the employee information And then finally, it all comes together from a timing perspective. Timing is now there for you. You don't have to wait for HR. You don't have to wait for anyone else. You can go in and make those changes real time. So it really puts you in the driver's seat for making changes. So along with that timing, let's look at what that really means here on the next slide. So as a manager, you're going to own the transactions for your team. And what we show here on the slide really is how that works. You'll see on the left-hand side as a manager, you'll enter information. HR business partners will often play a role in that step, either by making sure you have the right job code information to enter, and in some cases approving transactions, and we'll look at that on the right here in a moment. And then our teammates within HRIP or HRIS, depending on how you know them, will help enter and make sure those transactions are processed appropriately. So as a manager, what does this mean? Up on the top right, you'll see that you have the opportunity to enter and really process those transactions. And the key here is to make sure the data is accurate, right? So you'll see in that top right box, the responsibility lies with the manager to ensure the data is accurate. It really is garbage in, garbage out, or good data in, good data out. So we want to make sure, again, that you're entering the right job code or salary or effective date when you're entering the transaction. For some of those transactions, you'll see in the next box that the HR business partner is actually inserted into the workflow for approval. And that's for things like a salary or a title change to make sure it's appropriate and the timing is correct. And part of the reason HRBPs are in is because we know these are very sensitive and critical transactions, and we don't want one to flow through that could be inaccurate or not yet approved and have to pull that back from an employee. That wouldn't be a very good experience. And then again, our HRIS or IP teammates will make sure the data is accurate, that it gets processed through. They're really our check and balance, kind of a third-party partner if you want to think about them that way, to help us make sure everything's processed appropriately. And typically changes flow through within 24 to 48 hours. And again, that depends on the HRBP, if necessary, getting the transaction and approving it as well. So that's really a high-level view of the process and what MSS or Manager Self-Service does. On this next slide, again, what's changing for you? So as a manager, what really is changing? And the good news is nothing's being taken away. This is really an enhancement of the functionality and core that's already available out there. So as a manager, you have direct access to your team. And so what does that mean? You'll see a new screen which is shown there in the bottom left of the screen called a Manager Dashboard. And that's where you can go access your team and begin transactions. And then on the right is a sample of what the screen looks like when you pull or click on a team member. So obviously we have just some sample data in here of Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock, but what you would see would be actual members of your team. And again, Virginia's going to walk us through the functionality, but what's shown on the bottom right-hand screen here is the orange arrows that you click and how you walk through to start entering that information. If you're a TIAA manager on the call today, this should look very familiar. We closed down or paused Manager Self-Service at the beginning of 2017 when we were integrating the organization and migrating data because we needed to do a lot of validation of the data that was in the system. So this should look similar. We're effectively turning back on what you may have had before. And again, you'll be able to view that job information, job history, anniversary date, and comp data, which is one of the things we often get asked about as HR business partners. Now you'll have it available to you on an as-needed basis. So here on this last slide, I just want to reinforce that we're here to help you be successful with the tool, and that's why we're spending the time with it today. Virginia, again, will walk you through a step-by-step. We'll make job aids and other instructional materials, FAQs, available along with the launch of Manager Self-Service. And then we want to reiterate the use of our HR services team. So you see their information here on the screen. You can email them. You can call them. They're really great. They're very familiar with the tool and its capabilities. And if something doesn't look right or you have questions, they can help you with that as well. So before I turn it over to Virginia, just one last reminder that feel free to send us chat questions along the way, and we'll address them either during the session or at the end we will again open it up for Q&A. So with that, Virginia, I'm going to turn it over to you for a live demonstration.
Thank you, Christy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And today I will review the navigation for the most frequently used MSS functions in CORE. And as you are aware, CORE is easily accessible on the corporate intranet or via the HR Services portal. By clicking the CORE link here or the HR Services portal. And once you log in to the HR Services portal, you can, under Manage My Team, click on the CORE homepage link. Once you click that link, you will be routed to the home page of CORE. So most of you are familiar with this home screen of CORE, but now you'll see a couple of new icons. One of them is the My Team icon. And this My Team icon is your one-stop shop for all of your manager tasks, and I will review that momentarily. You will also see a team compensation icon, and by clicking that, that will list all of the salary and tiers for your direct reports. And this My Team icon, My Team Reports icon, will route you to a manager dashboard that has reports on your staff. Reports such as job history, PTO, and if you manage non-exempt employees, their time cards. So let's click on My Team icon. And when this page displays, this will list all of your direct reports. So as you can see here, Peter Parker, who's the manager, has several direct reports. And this is called a contact card. So we can see that Jane Doe is an administrative assistant, her contact information, location, and just basic information on your employee's job. If you click this orange caret, this will open up any task that you as a manager are able to submit. So for example, under absences, you can review or submit PTO on behalf of your employees. Under compensation, you can submit a salary request. And under personal unemployment, you can change your employee's location, their manager, if they are moving from part-time to full-time, vice versa. You can submit a termination request or a transfer request. So what I will do first, I know that you have been approving PTO via email, so I will show you in the system how the PTO page appears for your employee. So as you can see here, this is a summary of all your employees' PTO requests. And later on, when I review the reports dashboard, you will be able to run reports if needed for your entire team's PTO, etc. So what I will do next is one of the most frequent or common requests is changing an employee's manager. So we're going to go ahead and click on that orange caret once more. We're going to scroll down or navigate down to Personal and Employment and click on Change Manager. And once this page loads, as you can see here, the first thing you would need to do is enter the effective date of this change. Now effective dates can be in the future, so I'm going to go ahead and insert a date in the future. Now the action is already pre-populated, But as a manager, you are going to populate the reason, and you'll choose reporting change. And changing a manager is very simple. You can start typing the name of the new manager and then clicking it to populate in this field. Or you can click on the drop-down arrow and click on search. So once you populate the new manager's name, you're going to click on Review Changes. Now this will be common throughout any request that you submit. So the system wants you to review the changes that you are getting ready to submit. So I can see here, effective 12/8, Jane Doe will move from reporting to Peter Parker to Virginia Rizzo. Now once you submit this request, the receiving manager will receive a notification and will be prompted to approve. Now just as PTO request, managers can approve transactions via the email, and it will look very similar to the PTO request that you receive now. It will say action required. It will detail out what is changing. You can click approve or reject on the email, or you can do that through the core system by clicking on this little bell icon. Now if there's anything for you to approve or any action that you need to take, there would be a number highlighted in red here. And it's very similar to what you see now in the notification email. It would have the notification here and two buttons, either approve or reject. Now just to keep in mind that the HR operation team will be at the end of each transaction request, and they will review all changes to ensure that they are in good order. And also to note, any request that is entered and submitted in core will flow downstream. So for example, this request will appear on the phone directory the day after. There is a day delay between core and other systems. So this transaction will show up on the phone directory on 12/9. So let me go ahead and move over to the transfer transaction. Now the transfer function should be used if you have multiple changes to make on your direct report. So for example, if their job is changing, manager is changing, budget code is changing, all that can be accomplished by using the transfer functionality in core. What you would do again, you would click on this orange caret, and as you can see the pattern, everything is really done through the Manage My Team icon. You would go ahead and navigate once again to Personal and Employment and click on Transfer. Now, one thing I would love to mention is that requests should be made in advance of the effective date. And this is to ensure that you allow the time for this transaction or this request to be fully approved. So as Christy mentioned earlier, if there is a salary or job changing for your employee, that will require additional approvals from compensation and the HRBP. All requests will go with this transfer functionality will go to the manager's manager for approval. So once again, I'm going to choose a date in the future because I want to allow time for this transaction to be fully approved and create that better experience for the employee. Now this employee, Jane Doe, she's going to change jobs. And once again, if I know the job title, I can start typing the job title here, or Or what I can do is click on the downward arrow and click search. So if I know the job code, but I do not know the exact job title, I can search by either the job title or the job code. And you would select the one that you want. You have the option here to change the department. You have the option to change the location and or the manager. Once you make those changes, you will scroll back to the top. Now you can see something different from the manager change. So the manager change was very focused. You were only allowed or only available to change one attribute, which was the manager. But here, there's different pages for this transaction. So once you click Next, you will be routed to the compensation piece of this. So if this person was receiving a salary increase in association with this move, you can enter that information here. So you can either type in the new salary, you can type in the adjustment amount, or you could have typed in the percentage. Once you populate that information, you would click on Next. Now there's no action needed on this page, so you would click on Next again to review the changes that you are getting ready to submit. And just in the essence of time, I will not submit the transaction, but you can see here on 12/7, Jane Doe will be changing job titles. Her salary will change. And then you would just go ahead and click Submit. Now I do also want to mention that any request that you submit, you will also receive an email indicating that you submitted your transaction. And once it's been fully approved, you will also receive an email that your request has been fully approved. If for some reason your request was not in good order and was rejected at any point through the approval process, you will receive an email that your request has been rejected. So the next thing I would love to show you is the termination transaction. Now termination transactions are not as frequent, but it's one of the most vital requests. Managers are accountable for entering resignations or terminations for cause. If you have a reduction in force, there is no action needed on your part, as those are managed centrally. And it's very important to note that once the transaction or the termination has been submitted in CORE, this drives the stopping of their pay, their benefits, and the building and system access. So you really should ensure you enter the termination as soon as possible. If as a result, if you enter the termination after the last day, this will result in an overpayment of salary to the employee, and is definitely a risk to the company because that employee may still have building and system access and access to company property. So how do managers enter a termination? Once again, they'll navigate to that orange caret, click on Personal and Employment, and click on Terminate. Now let's say Jane Doe is getting a new job and it's closer to where she lives. So she is resigning. So as a manager, you're going to click on the resignation action and you will click Better Commute. Now the notification date, the date should be populated the date that the employee notified you that they are terminating, or the date you gave notice to your employee they are no longer with the company. The termination date should be the last date the employee will be paid. So Jane Doe, she submitted her, she gave notice today, 11:30, and she gave her 2 weeks notice, so her last day will be 12:15. So we're going to go ahead and populate 12:15 in this field. And if you agree that she should work until her last day, then you would put that date of 12:15 here in this field as well. Now let's say you work in a highly sensitive area and there is a business need for all terminations to be let go today, but pay them through that 12:15 date. You would put in today's date. Oops, I'm so sorry. Put today's date in this field. So in this example, Jane Doe, she is resigning. She has a new job and it's an easier commute. She gave notice that she is resigning on 11:30. She will be paid through 12:15 because of the nature of her work, and she has access to sensitive data. There is a need for her to leave today, but she will be paid until 12:15. If Jane Doe submitted a resignation letter, you have the ability to attach that document here using this plus sign. And once again, with all transactions, you will be prompted to review this transaction and then submit. Now for managers who are managing managers, if Jane Doe was a manager, you would have the ability to reassign any of her direct reports during this transaction. But Jane Doe is not a manager, so no action is needed here. And the last thing I would like to show you is the reporting dashboard. And I won't spend too much time just in the essence of the time we have here on this call. But if you wanted to run a report, you would navigate on the home screen to the My Team Reports icon. You will be routed to a manager dashboard. And these are the reports that are available to managers. You can run a job history report, address and phone data report. If you manage non-exempt employees, you can run overtime reports, compensation reports. And these tabs on top are regarding time cards and PTO. And to run a report is very simple. All you would need to do is click on one of these links. You would be routed to a page that looks just like this. You would click on that little gear, click on Export, and then your report will be downloaded in either Excel or PDF. And managers have the option to schedule reports. So you can schedule if you need a job history report every month. You can schedule that here as well to be sent to your inbox every month. Or if you want it more frequently, you can schedule it for Mondays or weekly, daily, whatever you need, whatever frequency you need the report in. And I'll just finish by saying I know that this is a lot of information, but please don't worry. There are plenty of resources that are available to you via job aids, or housed in the HR services portal, or you can contact HR services for support via phone or email. So at this time, I will hand over the presentation to Lori, who will discuss the Manager Resource Tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia, and hello to everybody. My name is Lori Miriam. I'm one of the learning partners with Nuveen. I'm going to share my screen now. And like Virginia said, there are a lot of resources available to you. We want to make sure you're very well supported in this transition to using Manager Self-Service. There are job aids available. You can contact HR services. There's also going to be in place an aid that's called Walk Me that will help you when you're inside the transaction. And I'm going to show you the resource tool that we've developed that's an end-to-end overview and detail of each transaction. You're going to find this on the HR Services page. Virginia already went over how to navigate to it. And we're going to look at Manager Self-Service Job Aids. It is going to be on the top of this screen. We're just waiting for it to be loaded. And when it's there, it's going to look exactly like this. So you're going to go in. I want to emphasize that this might look like some of the tutorials that you've taken in the past, but it's not a tutorial. It's a tool, which means you're only going to go directly to the transactions that you want to see, and then you can exit the tool and revisit it anytime you would like. So to move forward, it's an interactive tool. This gives you an overview of how the tool works. But since I'm doing that now, I will skip this and move right on to the table of contents. It is organized in the very same way that Manager Self-Service is organized. You can select any of these objects from the table of contents: time and attendance, how to review time cards, the allocation of PTO approval is in here, employee information changes, and then reporting. We go back to employee information changes, and we can look at Change Manager. Again, this is an end-to-end, so this is a nice simple one to show you how it's going to work. So when and why would I do this? If you select that, it will tell you why you're going to do this transaction. Now this is an obvious one, but there's other ones in there that are not quite as obvious, and you might find this field helpful. You can close it with the red X. Then we go over to how do I do this transaction, and after that, what happens after I do this. So how do I do this transaction? This takes the job aid and boils it all the way down for people who don't really want to see the entire job aid. We have extra information added here, like what information do I need to collect? There is a spreadsheet that will open when you click this link that will help you walk through gathering the information in advance. Confirm with appropriate resources. So you want to let your HR business partner know what's going on. You want to let the employee's manager or maybe the future manager that's getting them know what's going on, and the HR operations team will see the transaction come through. Then we look at processing the transaction. This is one of the few places you'll see the service level agreement with the HR operations team that they have requested a 2-day turnaround, which is very quick for the volume that they're dealing with. It can take up to 3 days for something to process in the system, and then things with a future date might not be visible. You can just use this list if you want to, or if you'd like to see a couple of screenshots just for clarity, you can click on them to see what we're talking about. If once you're in there, you're like, wait a second, I'd like to see the whole job aid. If there is a job aid available for this transaction, it will load when you click the job aid button. If there's no job aid available, the mouse over will say there's no job aid available for this transaction. Most of the job aids are also loaded in this resource area. And of course, you're going to find them on the HR Services tab as well. So when you're in here, you can go to the previous screen, and you can say, well, what happens after I do this transaction? What's the workflow? And it's processed by you. You've initiated it as their manager. The only approver is the receiving manager, and the HR business partner is an FYI only. Again, this is a simple transaction, but there's much more complicated transactions in there, such as a transfer where you could have compensation involved, or the HR business partner could also be an approver and not just an FYI. So I'll close out of that. There's a request or an opportunity for you to give feedback on any screen. It opens up a Qualtrics survey, and you can let it know what screen you're on and give feedback. So I'm not going to open that survey, but it's there on every main screen like this. If you hit the home screen, it brings you back to the table of contents, where you can, again, choose any other transaction. So let's say change multiple direct reports. When and why would I do this? obviously similar. How do I do this? Go back to previous. And what happens after I do this? That is the overview of the Manager Self-Service Resource Tool that will be available to you. And you can always reach out to anyone in HR Services with questions. Again, there's the job aids, and you'll have this really cool tool called Walk Me inside the transaction itself. So we hope that you feel very well supported in using this. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator, Susie, so that she can open the line for questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to register a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4 on your telephone. You will hear a 3-tone prompt to acknowledge your request. If your question has been answered and you would like to withdraw your registration, please press the 1 followed by the 3. If you're using a speakerphone, please lift your handset before entering your request. You may also submit your questions via the chat feature. One moment, please, for the first question.
Susie, while we wait for the first question, it's Christy. We do have a few in the chat feature that I'll go ahead and answer. So one of the questions we received is whether or not the system, when we're thinking about terminations, will notify our broker-dealer registration so that they can prepare U5s and other notifications as necessary. And the answer is yes. All termination data is sent to both our PTA and compliance. They have access to core reports, so that will help us automate this process. So that's another good thing to call out. And along those lines, that's why it's super important. I want to stress that we get terminations entered in advance. There are places like California where we have some requirements to make payment on the last day of work for any outstanding regular pay and PTO. And if it's not entered in a timely manner, we could be non-compliant for those type of requirements. So I think that's something really important to stress. And then we had another question about reporting and whether there's a job history report that would help a manager understand the tenure of an employee in each position and what that person's salary was along the way. And the answer is yes, there is a job history report. It's actually going to be right there on your My Teams report screen when you go in. And what it will show you is what job code someone was in, if there was a change, what was the action reason, and that again is part of the information that you would select around a job change or a transfer, that kind of thing. And the salary is listed there as well for the individual. One thing I would tell you, we often ask, can you see a promotion? And that's a little bit more tricky because sometimes people get promotions via applying for a job through Taleo, or they may be promoted within their team and it could be processed as a job change. We don't have a strict pull of promotions, so often it's by looking at a combination of someone's job change and whether or not they had a tier change, but there's not a straight pull of promotions. Susie, I'll stop talking and see if there are any questions on the line.
Thank you. There are no questions at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, to register for a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4. One moment, please.
Sure. Another question from the Q&A, and I admittedly don't know the direct answer here, so Diana or Virginia, maybe you do. It's asking whether or not there's any way to see how much PTO someone has left. Is there a report or anything that a manager can pull for their team?
Hi, Christy. This is Diana. So there is, and under the manager dashboard, there is a PTO summary, and that will show you for your staff what has been accrued to date for PTO, what PTO has been used, and the PTO available. So that is real time and is under the My Team Reports manager dashboard.
And Diana, thank you. Does that take into account, let's say I've already put in for time off later this year, does it show what's already been submitted but not yet taken?
I believe it does. I could double check, but usually those balances will both be what has been completed and what is scheduled to be taken.
Thank you. That's helpful. There's another question I see here in the chat asking about a team that was a legacy TIAA team, and when the manager runs the job history report, the job history appears to only show the Nuveen time. So I guess the question is, will we be seeing a job history report for someone's full-time, whether at Nuveen and Legacy Nuveen, or Nuveen and Legacy TIA, or is it really from January 1st of this year forward?
It should be their entire tenure, but I can double check that that particular manager to just double check. But it should be pulling the entire tenure of the employee. So whether they were working at Nuveen or they worked at TIA prior to the integration.
Got it. Thank you.
We would have a question on the phone lines coming from the line of Valerie Dixon. Please proceed with your question.
Hey, Christy, it's Ellery, actually. And my question is, would we also have access to the reviews of prior managers or any other key information in terms of developmental areas or anything like that that we could leverage?
Yeah, great question, Ellery. Thank you. So that information is actually already available within Talent Center. So slightly different system, but as a current manager, you will have access to prior reviews. They'll be stored by employee within Talent Center under the performance management area. And I can make sure that I get a job aid over to you to show how to find that. But that's a great question. This is really supplementing some data that we had already made available. Now you have the rest of it with job and salary information. Susie, are there other questions on the line?
Thank you. There are no further questions at this time.
Okay, well, we'll give you just another minute to think about questions, and I want to call out a couple of items. So what we did not tell you at the beginning of the call, because we didn't want to lose you to checking, was that this functionality is already turned on in Core. So what Virginia and Lori walked you through today is available. We did what we consider a soft launch versus saying, hey, it turned on today, and checked functionality and had a user group make sure they tested it for us over the last week or so. So what you saw today out in Core, you as a manager can already access and begin to utilize. So for those of you, I know a couple based on your questions, it looks like already have tried to go out and check it. You can. So you can go out and use this functionality today. And then I saw Diana just noted in our Q&A, but I want to make sure everybody saw that if the PTO request is approved, it will be deducted from the balance that you see in that dashboard that she referenced within Core. So it won't show that they have time left if they've already submitted all the requests and they've been approved.
We would have another question on the phone lines coming from the line of Joy Crenshaw. Please proceed with your question.
Sure.
Hi. Just for clarification, it wasn't so much if they've already used it, but for example, people have put in, this is regarding the PTO balances, days for Christmas or the holidays. So those are not to come. So it says submitted. So are those time hours already reflected in the PTO balance? Not things that have been used, but things that are future but have been already inserted into the system.
Got it. So requested, approved, and unused to date.
Exactly.
So Diana, if I read your note correctly, and keep me honest, if the PTO has been requested and the manager has approved it, it will be deducted from the balance even if it has not been taken yet.
That's correct. And the reason we do that is so the employee, if they go back to request more PTO, that they're doing it with knowing that the PTO that hasn't been taken has already been deducted. Otherwise, they may be requesting more PTO than they have. So that's why your balance, gets taken away from your balance even though it hasn't happened. Now, if the employee decides to cancel it, let's say the business is really busy, they can't take that time off or something happens, when they withdraw it, that withdrawal is what will give that balance back to their PTO balance. And that's why it's important that if an employee decides not to take the PTO, that they go in and withdraw it. Otherwise, then that has already been subtracted from their PTO balance.
Okay, two more things on that issue. Because people who accrue time can carry it over, I'm assuming the system will automatically carry over to the next year any unused time that's like within the availability.
Okay. Our policy is to carry over a maximum of 10 days. So if they haven't taken that time. So at the end of the year, if they still have 8 days left or things like that, or that equivalent of hours, and that will be carried over. But let's say somebody has more than that, more than 80 hours, then we will only, let's say they have 120 hours of PTO left over, only 80 will be carried over. So yes, the balances are all based on what has been entered by the employee, taken by the employee, and again, if it hasn't been taken up, it's really important to be withdrawn. Otherwise, the system won't know to not deduct it.
Okay, and then last question that I know of at least is just playing around with it. I went to Service to Community, and it says January 1st annual accrual, and then January 1st forfeiture, and it says 8 and then -8. So, but don't they get 8 hours to do in the community? It looks like it was automatically removed on the exact same day.
I'll have to check on that entry. So service to community is actually not part of your PTO, so it's on top of. So if you have a set amount of PTO, the service to community is not there. So it's just actually like a separate plan. I'm not sure why it's showing as forfeiture, but whether you take it or not, wouldn't impact your PTO time.
Okay.
We had a question in the Q&A chat online about whether or not a manager can approve absence records directly in CORE or just the email process. And the good news is you can do both. So you can utilize the email process. There's also a little notification feature in the top right corner of CORE. It looks like a bell, and you can click on that and go in and approve that way as well. Susie, any additional questions on the phone?
Thank you. There are no further questions at this time.
Okay, I just did a quick scroll of the chat. Teammates, keep me honest if we've missed any, but I don't see any that we haven't addressed via the chat feature, and it doesn't sound like there are any on the phone. So just 2 reminders. If you have any teammates or managers that you manage, we have one more session coming up on Monday, December the 4th. Please encourage them to participate. Also know that we are, again, recording this to make it available, and that the functionality is out there and it's something you can go look at. So utilize the resources that Lori referenced and that you see here on the screen if you have questions. And of course, if those don't work or you have additional questions, your HR business partner and our teammates are here to assist. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines. Have a great day.